I think the Civil War is already coming.
This man was the fringe candidate in Florida.
And did you in fact sacrifice a goat?
That happened.
See how he became a driving force in the white nationalist rally and what we can learn from it.
This country cannot continue down this track of this divisiveness and this hatred.
We'll also dig into the growing divide in mainstream politics with perspective from state and national leaders, including Florida House Speaker Richard Corcoran, State House Minority Leader Janet Cruz, Congressman Charlie Crist, and former Congressman David Jolly. Plus, State Senator Jack Latvala just entered the race for governor, and we'll put him to the test. This is Money, Power, and Politics.
We'll start with a closer look at the crisis this week that further divided the Republican Party and the nation and energized white supremacists and the Ku Klux Klan.
We're going to fulfill the promises of Donald Trump. That's what we believed in. That's why we voted for Donald Trump, because he said he's going to take our country back.
First, David Duke does not speak for the people who elected Donald Trump. A lot of good people who worried about jobs and the mess in Washington elected Donald Trump. But those neo-Nazi and Klan groups say that Trump fired them up, and the president fueled that fire by blaming both sides for what happened in Virginia, the racist bigots and those who oppose them.
I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it.
There are violent extremists on both sides of the spectrum. We've had attacks from the left as well, from the attack on Republican congressmen at a baseball practice, ambush murders of Dallas police, and yes, there was violence on both sides in Charlottesville. People who took part in this racist rally and those who denounced it did in fact brawl in the streets. And had it stopped there, the president may not have triggered as much of a firestorm as he did in blaming both sides, but it didn't stop there. Police say a white supremacist deliberately rammed his car into a crowd of anti-racists. So when the president equated prior acts of violence and street brawls to an act of deadly domestic terrorism in the here and now, that struck a nerve. And then he said this.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Both sides being people opposing racism and people who joined in a white supremacist rally.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
And that's where the partisan lines collapsed. Mitt Romney, for example, tweeted, "No, not the same. One side is racist, bigoted, Nazi. The other opposes racism and bigotry. Morally different universes." Marco Rubio added, "You can't allow white supremacists to share only part of the blame. We cannot allow this old evil to be resurrected." And a lot of conservative commentators weighed in.
What Trump did today was a moral disgrace.
I mean, I have like too much eye makeup on to start crying right now. It's disgusting.
He's so disgraced, not just the Republican Party, but the country.
The psychological fragility on display at that disgraceful news conference today are bone-chilling.
The nation's military leaders also spoke out, and the nation's business leaders spoke out and quit the president's business councils. And a nation so divided came together at least for a moment when we remembered the young woman killed by hate, and a grieving mother spoke out.
I'd rather have my child, but by golly, if I got to give her up, we're going to make it count.
In the second half of our show, we'll go in depth on the rise of hate and what else is driving the sharp divide across our nation. But first, we're shifting gears to the big news in state politics because we have a new and very interesting candidate for governor. Jack Latvala is a powerful Republican lawmaker from Tampa Bay who could catch a lot of people by surprise.
I'm proud to be your senator here in North Pinellas County, and I am running for governor of Florida.
State Senator Jack Latvala just made the race for Florida governor a lot more interesting. He has more experience in state lawmaking than any other candidate in the race, and he has money. Latvala said his political committee raised just short of $4 million before he entered the race, and he has perspective that sets him apart.
As a Republican Party, we need to be inclusive rather than exclusive.
Latvala supported high-speed rail from Orlando to Tampa Bay. He also supported plans to accept federal money under the Medicaid expansion, and he led the push to give tuition discounts to undocumented students in Florida.
Why penalize these young people for what their parents did 25 or 26 years ago.
He's a conservative, particularly on taxes, who places a high value on the environment. And on that note, he helped trigger one of the most awkward moments we've ever seen in a Senate committee meeting.
In the next iterations of them, will require to have language to that effect.
What were those words, Mr. Chairman?
After rumors spread that Governor Scott banned his staff from saying the words climate change, Latvala off camera and fellow Senator Jeff Clemons pressed Scott's emergency management director to say those words, and he couldn't do it. You can hear Latvala's boisterous laugh as that awkward moment plays out.
Is it will require that future versions of our mitigation plan will be required to have language discussing that issue.
What issue is that?
The issue that you mentioned earlier regarding
so much. The governor could get behind.
Well, Senator Latvala, thank you for joining us. I want to start with the comical exchange in which the state's emergency management director could not bring himself to say the words climate change. First question, do you really think the governor banned his staff from saying those words?
I don't know. That's kind of the lore around Tallahassee. I couldn't tell you that for sure. I have no firsthand knowledge of that.
In a Latvala administration, to what extent would you ramp up the fight against man-made climate change?
Well, I think we definitely need to pay a little more attention to sea level rise. I think sea level rise is a real problem that we have to face in Florida. Miami Beach is facing it already. We've got places here in Tampa, Davis Island, Tampa General Hospital, where I think that we've got to look and start preparing for the sea level rise that is occurring.
You said that you were dismayed by the governor's decision to kill high-speed rail in Central Florida. If elected governor, would you bring it back?
You know, I don't know. You know, that was 7 years ago. A lot of water under the bridge since then. I am a proponent of mass transit. I think we have to get people out of their cars. Every time I go to Orlando or try to go through Tampa at rush hour to go to Orlando to go through it at rush hour, I wish for some sort of an alternative way of getting there.
So would you fight to resurrect the high-speed rail project?
I don't know whether that project would be specifically the one, or whether there'd be some alternative to it.
The Republican Party has taken an increasingly hardline position on illegal immigration. Do you still stand behind your decision to support tuition discounts for undocumented students in Florida?
What that was for Florida high school graduates who've been residents of Florida for 3 years without regard to their parents' citizenships. What we were doing with the old system was we were punishing kids for what their parents did, and I don't believe in that. In-state and out-of-state tuition were set up originally based on who was a Florida taxpayer and who wasn't. The thought being that since 65% of our tuition is paid for by tax funds, that those who paid Florida taxes should get a break. You know, whether you're a citizen or not, in a sales tax economy, you still pay sales tax. So it's just a matter of equity. It passed overwhelmingly in both houses. The House sponsor was, or the guy pushing for it was Will Weatherford. People like Jeb Bush and Rick Scott were supportive of it. And I have no regrets whatsoever from doing that bill. It was the right thing to do.
On a grading scale, A, B, C, D, or F, what grade would you give President Trump overall so far?
You know, I would say in terms of his intentions on the big issues, I'd give him an A or a B. In terms of, you know, the way he conducts himself personally, his rash comments that he makes from time to time, his tweets, you know, probably a little lower.
A little lower as in C, D, F?
Well, not F, but, you know, at least C.
At least C, maybe D. So a $20 million federal block grant for substance abuse treatment centers expires and blindsides the treatment centers. Representative Peters and others did not see that coming. How can that happen, and who do you blame for that?
Well, obviously, we all voted for the budget, so we all share in the blame for that, and I don't attempt to pass the buck. I know that the Senate proposed to keep that money. It's non-recurring money. So the whole concept of a non-recurring money is that you can't count on it for 1 year to the next. We get grants from the federal government. When they run out, can we keep funding them forever? We get those kind of grants in a lot of different areas. I think it's unfortunate. The Senate tried to put more money in for drug abuse. I'm going to come back, and one way or the other, we're going to get more money for drug abuse. It's epidemic proportions, but you know, it just kind of fell through the cracks.
On the expansion of Medicaid, you pressed hard for a plan to expand health care through government support for people who cannot afford it. If elected governor, would you resume that fight?
We'd have to make that decision when we get there. I mean, I think health care is a big concern for a lot of people, but we first of all need to figure out what the feds are going to do with regard to health care at a national level. If they abandon Obamacare and all these people that are currently in Obamacare are now without coverage, then obviously that's one set of circumstances. If they continue what we have now, that's another set of circumstances.
Senator LaFella, thank you for your time.
Check out our YouTube channel for interviews with other candidates in the race, including Republican Adam Putnam and Democrats Gwen Graham and Andrew Gillum. Search for Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics and click subscribe at the top of the page. You'll also find our investigations of money, power, and politics.
On that note, you can also watch our interviews with St. Pete Mayor Rick Kreisman and former St. Pete Mayor Rick Baker as, of course, we approach the primary election in St. Petersburg. And, of course, you can catch up on prior shows you may have missed. A brief programming note. We're focusing on some special projects next week. Our show has a couple of bye weeks each year. So this show will be off next weekend, then back the following week, and business as usual after that. But we are still a long way from finish here tonight. Coming up, we'll show you how social media is fueling extremists and dividing our nation with perspective from both parties. Well, our nation has been divided for many years for many different reasons. That includes changes in how we all communicate as a society and changes in how extremists recruit.
I think the Civil War is already coming.
This is Augustus Saul Invictus.
Do you consider yourself to be dangerous?
I would hope so.
He was a fringe candidate who ran for Marco Rubio's Senate seat in 2016. He got blown out in the Libertarian primary.
America needs another Great Depression. It would teach people the meaning of life again.
In Florida, he may be best remembered for admitting to animal sacrifice.
And did you in fact sacrifice a goat?
That happened.
And calling for war.
So when you speak of total insurrection, you're speaking of violent insurrection.
I am.
Most people may write him off as a dangerous crank, but in the age of social media, people dismissed as cranks connect with others across the nation who have also been dismissed as cranks, and they draw support from one another. And then they're no longer isolated. Augustus Saul Invictus built a following online and became a driving force in the white nationalist rally in Charlottesville. There's his name, third down from Richard Spencer. Beyond the rallies, they feed off of social media. And while it transforms the way radicals communicate, coordinate, and inject their views, it has also transformed how mainstream Americans interact with one another. It's less personal and can be far more toxic.
It has always struck me that it's a little less personal. I mean, you and I are looking each other in the eye right now, and you don't see a whole lot of that human interaction as much as we used to before everybody had a device. I mean, I know it's a convenience, and I get that, and I advantage by it as well, but it just isn't as personal as things used to be.
On social media, things that shock people and make them angry tend to draw the strongest reaction, which drives a feedback loop because that's what social media algorithms drum up and highlight.
Oh my God! No!
Like an airline dragging a passenger down the aisle, it amplifies things that may be very uncommon that get people very worked up.
The reality is, in today's 24-hour news cycle and social media and Twitter, our passions come out.
Social media is designed to keep pushing out stuff that pushes people's buttons. Among other things, old battles play out. on the virtual battlefield, and that winds up affecting what our government focuses on.
I think part of the problem is that we're picking issues that at one time were not really significant.
Terrorists, go away!
The Confederate flags, the Confederate monuments, the Confederate problem in the South.
Get a cycle that stokes anger and division in an age in which people from different perspectives don't often mix unless they're slinging insults through a keyboard and trying to come across as smart without always clicking the headline to see what the post is all about or even knowing who posted it.
My friend, and I mean friend, Steve Scalise, member of Congress who was recently shot in the hospital. The hospital issued a statement saying he's in critical condition. And a Twitter follower with thousands of followers said, "You're wrong, he's in stable condition." Now, they were telling the hospital that the hospital was wrong.
Collectively, they're known as trolls. In another sign of the times, that would be an insult against the people we don't know who insult people they don't know. And they spout off vile personal insults from both sides of the aisle and infect the political landscape.
This country cannot continue down this track of this divisiveness and this hatred.
And so this technology that connects the world ironically makes it much harder for many people to connect.
Is we live in a moment-by-moment world, an instant gratification world, where you can have you can be offended and be upset with somebody and immediately pick up your phone and send it to the whole world. That didn't exist at all during Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan's day. If you're in the business of tearing people down, anybody can do that. Anybody can do it. Building things up and creating things, that takes talent.
Florida's Republican House Speaker Richard Corcoran and Democratic House Minority Leader Janet Cruz say it also takes people willing to put down their clubs.
I think that we need more of that. We need to return to that. You know, Richard Corcoran and I oftentimes get together for lunch. We agree to disagree on certain issues, but we work together on the issues that we can work together on.
And again, many different things fueled the hostility and the dysfunction we have in our politics, and we examine different factors here from week to week on this show. And in the coming weeks, we'll focus on how special interests and donors, courts, media outlets, and of course politicians themselves all have a hand in this. And of course, we'll also continue to investigate the big plans in the works in Congress. And on that note tonight, Evan Axelbank sat down with Congressman Dan Webster, and let's start with how Webster scores the White House.
So what grade can you give the President of the United States right now as a member of Congress?
Well, as a member of Congress, I believe we've been more productive than any Congress since Reagan.
You can't give a letter grade on the President right now.
No, I don't think I'm going to get it. I'm not responsible to give the President a letter grade. I'm supposed to go and do what I can.
Has he
in
done
Congress.
well? Has he been a good president?
All I said was that at least I have the chance of having something signed into law, and before there was no chance at all.
Your slogan is, "America isn't broken, Washington is." You said that was your famous slogan in 2016. It was on TVs playing across the district time and again. Is that still true?
Is Washington broken? Yeah.
You said America isn't broken, Washington is broken.
I think compared to America, yeah, it is.
Coming up, we're going to put Webster to the test on health care reform and the failure to get it passed through Congress, and we'll show how Steve Bannon's exit can drive some more big changes in the White House. Well, the Trump administration could try to take down Obamacare by cutting off payments to the insurance industry. And so Evan Axelbank asked Republican Congressman Dan Webster if the president should in fact try to do that.
Well, I think he should do it. I think it's a good thing. However, he's not going to get away with it.
What does that mean?
The law is the law. I mean, you know, there's a law. If they're going to probably go to court over it, they're going to win. I mean, the law is pretty specific.
So
I didn't write the law. I didn't vote for the law, but it's there, and I think he'll probably lose.
So as long as this law remains in effect, the president should provide the payments to bolster the Obamacare markets. So what are the prospects of repealing Obamacare? This is the #1 Republican pledge for the last, I guess, 7 years now. What are the prospects of it? When John McCain voted no, was that the end of it? Was that the death?
No, I think it'll still be tried.
Tried and failed and tried to, I mean.
No, it's going to have to. Obamacare is going to be repealed on its own, by itself, in the death spiral it's in, or somebody's going to step in and pass a bill. And I suspect as it spirals down, the pressure to do something different will be there.
Did the GOP oversell how easy this would be?
No, I don't think so.
They said the first day, The president said we're going to have beautiful health care.
Did the Congress? You're asking, does the Congress do that? Did the Republican Party do that? And I don't think they did.
Will you support the continuing resolution to keep the government open on a clean basis?
Clean basis. I don't know what clean basis means.
No,
but
no increase, no decrease.
I have to see it. I don't like continuing resolutions and so forth. I've voted against many of them, but I do believe that no one has proposed a budget that balances today. And if there's a shortfall, we should borrow the money in order to pay for it.
Coming up, what to expect next week in Washington after more big changes this weekend. We'll also break down the president's decision, chief of staff's decision, to oust top strategist Steve Bannon. So Steve Bannon had a rough week following the mooch and several other senior staffers of the White House out the door. This was a long time in the making, though. One of the biggest problems the White House has here following the exit of Bannon is not finding necessarily a new strategist, but responding to his explosive, controversial remarks about North Korea. As Bannon said, there is no military solution. They've got us. The generals certainly are already pushing back on that. It runs the risk of undermining the president's strategy overseas. That is one of the challenges we will face in 2 weeks on Money Power Politics. Take care.